Hello, guys. My name is Mohit. I'm a clinical psychologist at Anonita. Some of you would know me, but yeah, it's been a while since I've joined, and yeah, how are you guys feeling? The mood is slightly off. Is it because of the weather? Everyone's under the weather today. Okay, understandable. Sorry, tired. Yeah, long journey, especially for you. Today, I would really, first I would like to thank you all for joining because I know, as being the caregivers, it's not very easy for you to make time between your busy schedule. And the fact that you've all turned up here itself is your first step towards caring for yourself, I presume. So, thanks a lot for that. And today's session, we're going to be covering balancing support and self care, as the title suggests. It's all about caring for yourself while also helping your family members, helping the people who's recovering in your family. It's a huge role. It's not easy, and you matter. Even though in the family it is the person who's recovering and they're like the son of the family, and everything revolves around them. But still, it is you who is a part of the recovery team, and you are a major part of it. And without you, there is no way that process is complete. So, in this session, we're mostly going to cover how, in addiction, especially, and in journey of recovery, what is the role? What are the consequences of you being a caregiver? How you can take care of yourself, how you can balance taking care of yourself while also caring for the person who's recovering in your family, right? Mainly, we're going to focus on the topic of burnout, caregiver burnout, as we usually call it, how to spot it before it pulls you down completely, and what are the simple strategies or techniques which you can use to help yourself to manage your own stress, to manage your struggles, and also take care of your own well being while taking care of the family member who's recovering. Uh, that's exactly the point of the session today, the balance, being able to strike a balance between those two things. A lot of research in the field, especially in the field of addiction, says that the role of family is very huge. There is no recovery process without the role of family, and that cannot be overstated. You would know better than anyone here how much a family is important for the person who's recovering, and how much you are going through to help them in that process, and how big of a role you play in that. Even if you have to think of life or if you have to think of recovery as a journey, let's think of the person's GPS being broken, right? But the car is still running. It's going in the wrong direction, but it's running. And if it's running, it's because of the fuel. And that's because you guys are the fuel for the recovery process. You guys are the fuel in terms of the patient's recovery journey. And you have to make sure that it does not burn out completely. You have to make sure that you are physically, emotionally, and mentally prepared. You're there. You do not burn out in terms of that. And that is the entire focus of this session. Now, the main objectives of this session is understanding caregiver burnout, introducing the topic, how we can understand what caregiver burnout is. So, the first one is understanding the concept of caregiver burnout, and then we move into introspecting the family role adaptations. So, in a family, especially when there is a person who's recovering from addiction, we assume different roles. We assume different patterns of thinking, patterns of behavior towards them or towards anything. And we understand what kind of roles we assume in that process and how we are stuck in that role. We assume some roles and we are not able to come out of it. Is it helping us? Probably initially, probably during the beginning phase, it's probably helping us. But then, what are the long term effects it's having on us? All these things are something we'll cover in that. Examining signs and stages of caregiver burnout. What are the early signs of the caregiver burnout? What are the early signs that you can identify, recognize, and try to employ some strategies which we are going to look into as well, and how you can break that cycle and come out of burnout in a more effective way. Deconstructing normalized detrimental cycles. Again, in a family, there are different ways we interact with everyone, the different ways in which we develop different patterns of communication, and how do we write it. That is one thing. And then we're also learning to improve the communication styles, the way we interact with the person who's recovering, the way we interact amongst ourselves. How do we communicate better? Because we all know just shouting at them or just asking them to do certain things will not work out. What are the ways in which we can communicate better to probably gain better outcomes as well? That is one other thing. And then in the end, we're going to look at self-care strategies. And that is the most important part, I would say, of this session, because it's all about you today. It's not about the person recovering. Of course, it's all about that. But today, it's more about the people who are behind, the people who are in the background, providing a great support to the people who are recovering. And how do you take care of yourself? Because the process is not very easy, right? So these are the objectives for today's session. So by the end of this session, you'll come to see that taking care of yourself is not something which you're doing out of selfishness because you're feeling selfish. It's something which you have to do. It's a need of the hour of sorts to be able to survive, to be able to thrive, right? Now, coming to the heart of the conversation, caregiver burnout, right? So, the truth, the one major thing which we have to look at in today's session is that you matter. Not just for the person recovering, you matter because you as a human being are a separate individual and you need to take care of yourselves. Not for the sake of anyone else, but for yourself, right? And it so happens that in the process of recovery, we become so detached from ourselves and we forget that we also need to take care of ourselves. And we also neglect or ignore our own needs. And to what extent it is having an effect on us? What are the factors which are leading to us developing this burnout? Those are the things which we're going to look at now. Firstly, understanding the topic itself, caregiver burnout. Does anyone have any idea, any inputs on what you think caregiver burnout is? Any guesses? What do you understand by the term caregiver burnout? Stress? Okay. What else? Very good point. Very true, very true. You've hit a blank wall and you don't know where to go. You don't know what to do anymore. Right? What else? Financial burden. Very true. Extremely true. Because you've given a lot in the process. Right? And you feel lost and you feel like you've exhausted all your resources. Anything else? Losing patience. Very true. Anger. Any other inputs? You've heard a lot. All these are very, very true. And if we have to broadly classify them, I think we can say that caregiver burnout is something that happens. It's like a state of it's an emotion. It's a state of being where we have completely exhausted in terms of our physical, emotional, and general mental well-being. Right? We're completely exhausted and we have run out of our resources. And this can be seen it can include all these things. You feel physically tired all the time. It could be that you're easily irritated. You feel very angered very easily. And then you may also feel sad, frustrated, and you feel low most of the times. And you also end up avoiding people. You're not as interactive as you were before. You tend to avoid certain social situations. You close off, basically. And then you also see some symptoms in terms of your bodily, like the way you take care of your body as well. You'd probably not be eating well, you'll not have a regular sleep, and you're generally not feeling the way you used to before, right? So these are some of the early signs which are there. Of course, we're going to look more about it more into the detail later on. But yeah, these are the major factors which are there when we talk about caregiver burnout. Another topic which is closely related to it, the caregiver burnout, is compassion fatigue, something which leads to caregiver burnout eventually. Compassion fatigue is rightly termed as the cost of caring. You are very hopeful in the beginning when you start off in the journey of recovery for the person you care for. You're very hopeful, but it's an emotional roller coaster. There are days when you're completely hopeful and those highs are there, and there are these loops of relapses, and there are also lows where you feel completely disappointed, hopeless. But unlike an amusement park, in this roller coaster, there is no exit sign, there is no seat belt. You're completely left all by yourself and you have to fend for yourself. And that's exactly why this session is being held. In what way you can help yourself. This concept which is there, compassion fatigue, it's we can call it a close cousin of caregiver burnout. And it's usually happens when you internalize the pain. You're caring for someone because they are in pain, but then you internalize it over a period of time, and that becomes your pain. It's like you're going in the rain, you're holding umbrella for someone, right? But then over a period of time, you're completely drenched. You're holding an umbrella because the other person is, you don't want them to get drenched, you want them to be dry. But then what happens in the long run? You're completely drenched, you're completely burnt out. That is what happens when we're talking about compassion fatigue. You care so much without getting anything in return. You're giving support constantly, but there's no care that you're receiving. And you're not also seeing any outcome or result from that care which you're giving. Eventually, you're bound to feel this way. You're bound to feel fatigued. You're bound to feel burnt out, right? And these two concepts are the major things why we have to look into the ways in which we can take care of ourselves. What are the risk factors? What are the things that lead to caregiver burnout in the long run? Stigma, especially. There's a lot of social stigma in terms of any mental health disorder. And when we're looking at recovery of addiction, especially, there's a lot of blame which is there. I'm sure all of you at some point would have faced this blame as well from your own family members sometimes, from the people who you're close to, from your friends. They say it's because you've not brought them up well. It's because of your upbringing that this has happened, right? So you take a lot of that blame as well. But then there's also these, over a period of time, you end up blaming yourself as well. You end up believing it and you end up feeling very guilty. Has anyone felt this? Has anyone felt guilty for the way the problem that has resulted in their loved one? Have you ever felt guilty? Yeah. So it's very common. It's very commonly seen. And another thing is, second factor is chronic exposure to relapse cycles. So in addiction especially, there's a lot of relapses that will happen. There'll be lapses, there'll be relapses. And every time it may be as bad as before, as worse or something, or it may not be as bad as well. But there'll be a lot of triggers, there'll be a lot of consequences of those relapses. And you'll constantly be exposed to that. So you feel like, what are we doing all this for? There's no point in this. There's no point in the process of treatment itself. Why are we even caring for them? And then there'll be denial and blame within family systems. Again, so there's a lot of denial coming from the person who's recovering, from the people in the family who's recovering from addiction. They'll always deny. They may always say, no, it's not my fault. They blame it on external factors, right? And then there's also blame or they may even blame you. In fact, the people who are recovering may blame the people who are caring for them, saying, you are the reason I'm here. You are the reason I'm going through all this, right? So there's denial from them, and there's also blame which is being, being imposed on you. And then there's also conflicted roles. You're not just their parent, you're not just their brother, you're not just their close one. You're also their emotional punching bag. You're also their personal psychotherapist, I would say. You're also their venting machine. You play a lot of roles, and there'll always be a conflict between what role you actually are and what role that's being imposed on you by them. So that's also another thing. And isolation from friends and support networks. When a person is going through some kind of an addiction or something, you end up isolating. You don't want to interact with people because of the first point, stigma. You don't want to talk to them because you're scared of the judgment. You don't want them talking to you about it. You don't want to hear more from others. You've heard a lot already. You're going through a lot by yourself. So that's another thing that's there. And that causes isolation because you don't want to interact with people which you used to before because of the current issues. You are more isolated. Your support system gets very, very drained. And then there's emotional investment. You're so emotionally invested in the process of caring. We all are, right? And the close family members are always the ones facing the brunt of it. You're always the people who are giving in a lot more than what you're receiving. And these are some of the major risk factors which are there in terms of developing caregiver burnout over time or feeling fatigued, right? And then there's also another concept which I want to talk about. It's called an ambiguous loss. This was coined by a researcher. Ambiguous loss is when you start grieving for the person who's still there. It usually happens that in a family when, even though you know that the person is still there, you start grieving, not because you've lost them, but because they are not themselves anymore. They are not the person you expect. They're not the people who you want to see become something. And because they're in this process of recovery or they're having a particular issue, their expectations are not being met. It's like you're serving dinner for some one person. You're setting up a plate, a dining table for someone who's never turning up for dinner. So this is another concept which is there, which is an added-on risk factor. The concept of ambiguous loss, right? And then it's all these reasons, right? All these factors which are there, it just keeps on adding. There are enough reasons for you to feel burnt out. There are enough reasons for you to feel like giving up. It doesn't mean you're failing. It does not mean that you're failing. You're just fatigued. And it doesn't mean that you're weak to feel fatigued. It only means that you're human. As much as you are helping take care of the person, you also need to give a fraction of that care, a fraction of that support to yourself to ensure that you are well and you will be able to care for them even better. Because without you, the recovery process is not complete. It completely stops. You are the fuel running that car. Now, going to the next important concept which we're going to talk about, family role adaptations, right? Now, imagine in a family when there is a person who's going through addiction. It just does not affect the person. It causes a lot of ripples to different persons in the family. It causes ripples and it affects different systems in the family, right? And the way it impacts everyone, it's like an earthquake because once they're going through an addiction, it's like the emotional foundation of the family is broken, is shaken. And everyone in the family is scurrying. You're trying to grab onto something, you're trying to survive. You're trying to grab onto something, you're trying to hide, you're trying to do something, you're trying to hold onto something which is falling apart. But it's not helping, right? Because the emotional foundation is shaking. And in that exact moment, what happens is when a person is going through addiction, we all just want to survive, right? We all just want to keep it going somehow. And we assume certain roles. We grab onto certain roles. These roles have definitely helped us. These roles have helped us to maintain what is happening, to keep things intact to some extent at least. But these are like old, worn out clothes. It doesn't fit you after a time. And sometimes you end up wearing them, you end up wearing them for longer than you're supposed to. And then you grow out of it. And now you don't know how to take it off. And that's exactly what we have to talk about. Because at one point in time, it may have helped you. All these roles which you've probably assumed may have helped you. But it not necessarily, it need not necessarily be helping you right now. And in fact, it may even be detrimental to the process of recovery and to yourself. Right? And that is exactly why we need to look at these things. The first role, the addict, is the person with the substance use problem, as I told you in the beginning. The person around whom the entire family revolves, the son of the family, we can say. Right? Their behavior may be causing dysfunction in the family. Their behavior is what is probably causing the ripples in the family, shaking the emotional foundation as we spoke about. And then there's the enabler who tries to fix or cover up the problem to avoid the conflict. So in the family, there's this one person who's always trying to cover up for it. So if initially if there is substance use which is seen, they try to cover it up. They say no, it's only or you just make an excuse for the person. These things, although is keeping the family intact, not creating bigger issues, in the long run is enabling the person to fall into this cycle of addiction, right? So over a period of time, in the long run, even if something which you're doing right now is just trying to keep the family together, in the long run, it is going to an eternal doom of sorts because it is enabling the person to fall into the pattern of addiction again, right? And then there's also the hero, the person who takes on most of the responsibility, the person who has most of the anxiety, the person who experiences the most amount of guilt because they are trying to solve, they're trying to resolve it, they're trying to bring a balance between the person who's recovering, the person who's having an issue, and then the rest of the family members. And they are often the people who are in the background who do not receive enough care and attention. And most of you, I would say, fit into the role of the hero because you're all trying to help help the people in your family who are recovering. And you take in a lot of effort to support, and you end up feeling more guilty and more anxious and more worried, and you end up feeling the most of the negative emotions, right? And then there's the scapegoat of the family who brings out the things which you are afraid to talk about, the things which are not. This is the person who gets scolded the most. This is the person who's the most boldest. This is the person who will want to talk about the issues that are there without any filter, right? But they are being blamed for it or they are being shushed for it. That is the scapegoat. And the lost child is someone who's completely lost their share of care which they're supposed to be getting because of another person. Because a son is probably, in this cycle of addiction, the youngest one or probably the oldest one becomes completely numb. It's not like you don't have to take care of that person. They are completely self-reliant. They have become self-sufficient to some extent. They do not expect anything out of you. And they have lost the support which they're supposed to get as well. So that is another effect which is having on them. Because they don't want to put an additional burden on the people who are already caring for the person who's recovering. And then there's the mascot. A mascot is a person who tries to neutralize the situation. When there is a conflict, when there are serious altercations in the family, they try to bring a balance just for that time being by cracking a joke, making fun of something like that. It's like that is the person. And even in that person, although they are they're distracting from the situation, they are just trying to keep a balance. They're just trying to keep everything together, diffuse the situation so that it doesn't end up becoming worse. So all these roles, it just doesn't mean that one person sticks to one role. Sometimes we are navigating between different roles at different points in time and different situations. It just means that all these roles have helped us keep the family together, keep a family working or going on in some way. But in the long run, it's not helping us anymore. It's not solving the situation. It's not helping in the process of recovery. How do we come out of this? Why is it important? Because these roles, in the long run, contribute as a factor in developing burnout, in developing fatigue, increased fatigue, right? And now I would like to call upon my colleague Devapriya to talk about the signs of caregiver burnout. What are the indicators that you are heading in that direction, right? And then we look at the self-help strategies. Thank you, guys.